The courtroom cameras caught a single moment. One that would shatter the internet and rewrite what it truly means to be entitled. Victoria Ashford Wellington stood before Judge Judy, dripping in diamonds worth more than most people's homes, radiating the kind of arrogance that only comes from a lifetime of never being told no. With a perfectly manicured finger, she pointed straight at America's toughest judge as words left her mouth that would ruin her life forever. Look, I don't need a lecture from someone who's essentially a servant to the television network. The silence that followed was beyond chilling. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed into the kind of death stare that has made millionaires break down on national TV. But what unfolded over the next 47 seconds would turn Victoria from pampered socialite royalty into the most despised woman in America, begging for mercy from the very judge she just called a servant. Before we break down the total destruction of the most privileged Karen ever caught on camera, make sure you smash that like button if you're ready to watch old money finally collide with real consequences. Hit subscribe because what Judge Judy exposes about Victoria's dark past will leave you absolutely speechless. The downfall you're about to see is so incredibly satisfying, you'll want to replay it again and again. But to really understand how completely Victoria Ashford Wellington's world was about to crumble, we have to go back to the moment she first walked through those courtroom doors, convinced she was untouchable. This day was supposed to be just another typical Tuesday in Judge Judy's courtroom, another small claims case, another quick verdict, another routine episode of televised justice. On paper, the case looked almost boring. Victoria Ashford Wellington versus Rosa Mendes. A disagreement over a designer scarf, allegedly stolen by a former housekeeper. Producers had slotted it in as a standard 15-minute segment. No big drama, nothing remarkable. None of them realized they were about to film the most viral courtroom moment in daytime TV history. Because Victoria Ashford Wellington wasn't just rich, she was the walking, talking embodiment of generational wealth. Her great-grandfather had built an oil empire in the 1920s. Her grandfather expanded it into real estate. Her father multiplied the fortune with hedge funds and political clout. Victoria herself? In 48 years, she had never worked a single day. She didn't have to. The family trust fund pulled in more interest each month than most Americans earn in an entire year. But all that money hadn't bought Victoria class, kindness, or even basic decency. It had given her something far more dangerous, the absolute belief that everyone else existed to serve her and that consequences were for ordinary people, not for the Ashford Wellingtons. That morning she arrived at the courthouse in a chauffeur-driven Mercedes S-Class, wearing a Chanel suit that cost more than Rosa's monthly rent. Diamonds flashed at her neck, wrists, and ears. Her designer sunglasses sat atop her head like a tiara. She moved through the courthouse halls like visiting royalty, her Louboutin heels clicking with the rhythm of pure entitlement. Court staff who encountered her that morning would later describe her behavior as shockingly dismissive. She actually snapped her fingers at the security guard, ordering him to hurry with the metal detector. She talked to the receptionist without even glancing up from her phone. She tried to cut in front of the line of people waiting for courtroom assignments, loudly announcing that she didn't have time to stand around with everyone else. For Victoria, this wasn't unusual. This was her normal. This is how she moved through the world every single day, and she honestly believed this behavior wasn't just acceptable but appropriate for someone of her status. On the opposite side of the courtroom sat Rosa Mendes, a 42-year-old single mother of three, the exact kind of person Victoria looked down on. Rosa had come to America 15 years earlier with nothing but hope and determination. She worked as a house cleaner, restaurant server, hotel maid, anything she could find to support her children. 5 years earlier, she'd accepted a job as Victoria's full-time housekeeper, thinking that the steady paycheck and benefits would finally provide stability for her family. Instead, those 5 years became a brutal masterclass in humiliation. Victoria didn't treat Rosa like an employee, she treated her like property. Cameras monitored her constantly. Victoria called at all hours for petty demands. She criticized everything, Rosa's accent, her clothes, even the way she arranged flowers. Rosa endured it day after day because she needed the job, because her kids needed health care, because single moms without degrees don't get to casually walk away from steady work. Until the Christmas party. In front of about 50 guests, Victoria accused Rosa of theft, shamming her so viciously that Rosa's youngest daughter went to bed sobbing, asking why the mean lady hated her mom. That was the breaking point. Rosa finally found the strength to quit. And that's when Victoria decided to teach her a lesson about what happens when servants forget their place. What neither woman had any idea about was this: the night before, Judge Judy had done something she only does for especially troubling cases. She dug deep. Background checks, phone calls to former employees, detailed research. What she found was a disturbing pattern that went way beyond a scarf. She uncovered things about Victoria that could easily lead to criminal investigations. The stage was set for a confrontation that would expose not just workplace abuse, but a lifetime of privilege weaponized against those with no power. Victoria believed she was walking into this courtroom to punish an uppity housekeeper. She didn't realize she was about to come face to face with one of the only authority figures in America who didn't care about her last name, her bank account, or her fancy connections. Judge Judy was ready, and Victoria's 48 years of never hearing the word no were about to come crashing down in the most public, humiliating, and devastating way imaginable. To really grasp the scale of what was about to go down, you have to know who these people were and what brought them to this explosive moment. Victoria Ashford Wellington was born into a world most people only ever see on screen. Her family's Connecticut mansion boasted 14 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, and a staff of 12. She went to elite private schools where the yearly tuition cost more than a luxury car. Her 16th birthday party was literally featured in Town and Country magazine. Summers in the Hamptons, winters in Aspen, Europe as her personal playground, that was her life. But here, what made her truly dangerous: she had never, not once, faced a genuine consequence. Failed a class her father donated to the school and suddenly she passed. Got caught shoplifting as a teen, the family lawyer made it disappear. Crashed 3 cars before turning 21, insurance and influence swept it all away. By 48, Victoria had mastered the art of using her wealth as a weapon against anyone she saw as beneath her, which, in her mind, was almost everyone. Her reputation in Greenwich society was infamous for all the wrong reasons. She'd gone through 47 housekeepers in just 10 years. 47. That's a new housekeeper every 2.5 months. Former staff who spoke anonymously described truly disturbing psychological abuse. She would hide items, then accuse employees of stealing. She intentionally left messes to test them. She had cameras in every room, even bathrooms, claiming it was for security. One former chef said Victoria made her taste every dish not to check quality, but because she was genuinely paranoid that the help might poison her. And it didn't stop at her own staff. Restaurant servers knew her by name and dreaded it. She gotten at least 7 people fired over petty complaints about imagined slights. Store workers learned to give her discounts just to avoid her rants. Even local police were familiar with her number, having responded to countless noise complaints she made about neighborhood kids simply playing outside. This wasn't someone having a bad week. This was a long-term pattern of using privilege as a weapon against anyone who wouldn't grovel. Now let's talk about Rosa Mendes, the woman Victoria chose as her next target. Rosa's journey to the U.S. was fueled by one thing: a mother's desperate love. Back in Mexico, her kids faced failing schools, limited chances, and a frighteningly uncertain future. Rosa made the incredibly painful decision to leave them with her mother temporarily, promising to bring them over as soon as she could. Those early years in America were brutal. Rosa juggled 3 jobs at once, surviving on about 4 hours of sleep a night, sending every extra dollar back home. She cleaned office buildings overnight, served breakfast at a diner in the morning, and did laundry service in the afternoons. After 3 grueling years, she'd finally saved enough to bring her children to the U.S. So when the job with Victoria came along, it seemed like a miracle. Good pay, health benefits, steady hours, the stability her family so desperately needed. Rosa assumed a wealthy household would mean professionalism and respect. She had no idea she was stepping into 5 years of calculated humiliation that would push her to the edge. The courtroom doors opened and Victoria made her grand entrance like she was strolling a red carpet at the Met Gala. Her designer heels clicked sharply with each step. She didn't simply walk to the plaintiff's table, she glided, chin lifted at an angle screaming superiority, barely acknowledging that other human beings existed in the room. Rosa sat quietly at the defendant's table, hands folded, her posture radiating a quiet dignity that even 5 years of abuse couldn't erase. She wore her best dress, carefully chosen from Target, mindful of her tight budget. The contrast between them could not have been more stark or more symbolic. Judge Judy entered with her trademark no-nonsense energy, and the case began. Ms. Ashford Wellington, you're suing Ms. Mendes for $5,000 claiming she stole a designer scarf from your home. Tell me what happened. What came next was a full display of entitled delusion. Victoria launched into her story with the dramatics of someone performing for an audience she assumed would automatically be on her side. Your Honor, this woman worked in my home for 5 years. I trusted her with access to my personal belongings, my family heirlooms, my entire life. And how does she repay that trust? By stealing a limited edition Hermes scarf worth $5,000. She paused, clearly expecting gasps of sympathy. Judge Judy's face stayed completely unreadable. Continue, she said. These people, Victoria began, and the way she stressed those two words made several audience members physically cringe. They come into our homes and we treat them like family, we pay them generously, we give them opportunities they'd never have otherwise, and this is how they show gratitude. Judge Judy's eyebrow lifted slightly. These people. Missing the warning completely, Victoria doubled down. You know what I mean? People who need these positions, service workers, the help. They often don't understand boundaries or respect for other people's property. The air in the room felt like it dropped 10 degrees. Ms. Mendes, Judge Judy turned to Rosa, tell me your side. Rosa's voice trembled at first, but there was a quiet power in her words that grabbed everyone's attention. Your Honor, I worked for Mrs. Ashford Wellington for 5 years. I cleaned her home 6 days a week. I took care of her belongings like they were mine, better than mine actually. She paused, gathering strength. The scarf she's talking about, I asked if I could borrow it for a job interview. I was looking for a second job because I needed money for my daughter's dental work. Mrs. Ashford Wellington said yes, she told me I could borrow it. That's a lie, Victoria snapped, cutting in. Judge Judy's hand shot up. You will not interrupt in my courtroom, Ms. Ashford Wellington, you'll get your turn. Victoria's cheeks flushed, but she forced herself silent, clearly unused to being shut down. Rosa continued, more confidently now. I returned the scarf the next day, clean, folded perfectly. 2 weeks later, after I gave notice to quit, she called the police and said I stole it. She told them I never brought it back. And why did you quit, Ms. Mendes? Judge Judy asked, leaning in slightly. Rosa's eyes glistened, but her voice didn't waver. Because I couldn't let my children keep watching their mother be treated like she was nothing. Judge Judy looked from Rosa to Victoria and back. Longtime viewers instantly recognized the expression on her face. She already knew what her judgment would be. Now she was simply giving Victoria enough rope to hang herself. Ms. Ashford Wellington, let's discuss your relationship with Ms. Mendes while she was employed. How would you say you treated her? Victoria straightened, clearly believing this was her moment to paint herself as the reasonable one. I treated her exactly how an employer should treat an employee. I was fair but firm. I have high standards because I pay for high-quality work. High standards, Judge Judy repeated flatly. Describe those for me. For example, Victoria said, I expected punctuality, attention to detail, respect for my property and my privacy, basic professional expectations that anyone in the service industry should understand. Judge Judy calmly pulled a sheet of paper from her folder. Is it true that you called Ms. Mendes at 2 a.m. to pick up your dry cleaning? Victoria brushed it off with a wave. Once or twice perhaps when I had an emergency. When you have a full-time employee, they need to be available when you need them. At 2 in the morning for dry cleaning, Judge Judy repeated. Your Honor, with all due respect, I don't think you understand the demands of maintaining a household of my caliber. These things require round-the-clock attention. The audience murmured with disapproval, but Victoria seemed to take it as agreement instead of outrage. Judge Judy moved on. Let's focus on the scarf. You say Ms. Mendes stole it. She says she asked to borrow it and you agreed, which is true. Victoria's polished mask slipped, revealing something colder. Let me be completely honest, Your Honor, yes, she asked. And yes, I did say she could borrow it, but when she gave notice that she was quitting without proper warning, without thinking about how her leaving would inconvenience me, I changed my mind. The room fell dead silent. Even Victoria seemed to realize she'd stepped in it, but her pride wouldn't let her backtrack. You changed your mind after she had already borrowed and returned the scarf? Judge Judy asked. Exactly, she needed to learn that actions have consequences. You can't just quit on people like me and expect there to be no repercussions. These service workers have to understand their obligations. People like you, Judge Judy repeated slowly, her voice getting that razor-sharp edge regular viewers know all too well. What exactly do you mean by people like you, Ms. Ashford Wellington? And then Victoria made the mistake that would define her life. She laughed. A short, condescending laugh that rang through the courtroom like a gunshot. Your Honor, let's not pretend. My family has been a pillar of Connecticut society for 4 generations. We employ dozens of people. We contribute to the community. People in my position have certain expectations about loyalty and respect from those who work for us. Judge Judy's face didn't visibly change, but her eyes flashed with something dangerous. I see, and do you believe that Ms. Mendes, as your employee, owed you a different level of respect than you owed her? Frankly, yes, Victoria answered. That's how an employer-employee relationship works. There's a hierarchy, a natural order. She works for me, not the other way around. So in your view, Ms. Mendes was beneath you, Judge Judy said. In the professional sense, absolutely. That's just reality, Your Honor. Some people serve and some people are served. That's how society functions. The words hung in the air like poison. Judge Judy's voice dropped to that quiet, deadly tone that signals someone is about to get obliterated. Ms. Ashford Wellington, let me ask you something. What do you think I do for a living? Victoria frowned, thrown by the question. You're a judge on television. That's right, I work for a television network. They pay me to do a job. Does that make me a servant in your mind? And then Victoria delivered the fatal blow that would be replayed millions of times online. She rolled her eyes and sighed dramatically. Look, I don't need a lecture from someone who's essentially a servant to the television network. You're paid to do a job just like Rosa was paid to do hers. Let's not pretend you're any different from her. Can we just get to the ruling so I can get back to my actual life? The silence that followed wasn't just quiet, it was the stillness right before a bomb goes off. 47 seconds. That's how long it took for Victoria Ashford Wellington's entire world to implode. Judge Judy rose slowly from her chair, every movement controlled and deliberate like a volcano preparing to erupt. That calm was far scarier than any shouting could have been. Everyone in the room held their breath. They knew they were about to see something they'd never forget. A servant. Judge Judy repeated, her voice lined with 25 years of judicial authority. You just called me a servant. For the first time, Victoria's confidence flickered, but her ego still wouldn't let her back down. I simply meant that we both work for someone. There's nothing wrong with. Be quiet. Those 2 words sliced through Victoria's sentence like a blade through silk. You've talked enough, now you're going to listen. Judge Judy reached for the thick file she'd prepared the night before. As she placed page after page on the desk, the color drained from Victoria's face. Mrs. Ashford Wellington, since you feel the need to lecture me about understanding my place, let me educate you about yours. I've spent 25 years serving justice. You've spent 48 years serving only yourself, and I'm about to show everyone exactly what that looks like. She held up the first document. This designer scarf you claim is worth $5,000. I had it authenticated by 3 independent experts. It's a counterfeit worth about $200. You're suing your former housekeeper for 25 times its actual value. Victoria's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Oh, I'm not finished, Judge Judy said, her voice turning even colder. I did something I almost never do. I contacted your previous employees. Do you want to know what I found? In the last 8 years, you filed 13 small claims cases against former household staff. 13. Every single one filed right after they quit, every single one alleging theft, and every single one either dismissed or settled because you couldn't prove any of it. The room was so silent you could hear the cameras humming. This isn't about a scarf, is it, Mrs. Ashford Wellington? This is about punishing Ms. Mendes for daring to quit, for refusing to tolerate your treatment, for believing she deserved better than abuse. Judge Judy lifted another paper, and Victoria visibly recoiled. This one is my personal favorite. Text messages between you and your friend Amanda Blackwell sent 2 days after Ms. Mendes resigned. I'll read them for the record. That ungrateful woman actually quit without notice. I'm going to sue her for that scarf and make sure she never works in Greenwich again. These people need to learn loyalty. Gasps echoed through the audience. Rosa's hands flew to her mouth. But there's more, Judge Judy continued, her tone now absolutely icy. The IRS has had you under investigation for 6 years for failing to pay proper payroll taxes for your household employees. 6 years, Mrs. Ashford Wellington, you've been paying people off the books, denying them proper benefits and pocketing the tax savings. That isn't just unethical, it's criminal. By now, Victoria was visibly shaking. Her earlier bravado had disappeared completely. You called me a servant, Judge Judy said, leaning forward, eyes locked onto Victoria like lasers. Let me explain the difference between us. I serve justice. I serve the law. I serve the truth. You don't serve anything except your own grotesque sense of entitlement. She picked up her gavel, and Victoria instantly understood what was coming. Judgment for the defendant. You get nothing. In fact, you will pay Ms. Mendes $15,000 in punitive damages for malicious prosecution, emotional distress, and abusing the legal system. The gavel slammed down with the finality of a guillotine, and in that instant, Victoria's 48 years of dodging consequences came to an end. The echo of the gavel hadn't even faded before her carefully engineered life started collapsing. The transformation was immediate and shocking. Even the most seasoned court staff, people who had seen thousands of cases, stood frozen. Victoria's face flashed from pale shock to furious red to a sickly gray. Her flawless makeup couldn't hide the reality. For the first time in her privileged life, she was facing real, unavoidable public consequences. Wait, she choked out, her voice cracking. Wait, you can't be serious. $15,000 for what? I'm the victim here. She stole from me. Judge Judy's expression stayed stone cold. Ms. Ashford Wellington, I just explained in detail that she didn't steal anything. Listening clearly isn't one of your strengths. But that's not fair, Victoria's voice climbed higher, her composure crumbling. You don't understand my situation. Do you know who my family is? I know exactly who your family is, Judge Judy replied calmly. And I know exactly who you are. You're a bully who uses money as a weapon. You're an abuser who hides behind wealth and privilege. And in my courtroom, none of that counts for anything. Victoria shot to her feet so fast that her chair almost toppled. Her designer handbag slipped from her hand, spilling its contents, makeup, credit cards, and a pile of luxury store receipts across the floor like confetti for the world's most pathetic celebration. This is ridiculous, she screamed, completely dropping any remaining facade of elegance. I came here for justice, and instead I'm being attacked by someone who doesn't understand how the real world works. You're supposed to protect people like me from frauds and thieves like her. The audience exploded into stunned whispers. Even Judge Judy looked briefly taken aback by the sheer depth of Victoria's delusion. People like you, Judge Judy repeated, her voice now carrying a final, devastating weight. Let me make something perfectly clear, Ms. Ashford Wellington. People like you are exactly why I love my job, because once in a while I get to remind entitled bullies that money does not buy immunity from accountability. And she still wasn't done. Judge Judy reached for one last document, and you could tell from her expression that she'd been waiting to drop this bomb. Ms. Ashford Wellington, I'm doing something I almost never do. I'm forwarding the evidence of your IRS violations and your ongoing labor law abuses to the district attorney's office, along with a strong recommendation for criminal prosecution. Your little game of punishing employees who dare to quit ends today. That's when Victoria finally broke. The tears started as a glimmer, then quickly flooded down her face, dragging her makeup into dark streaks that made her look like a melting mannequin. Her entire body trembled as reality hit her all at once. Please, she sobbed, voice stripped bare of the earlier arrogance. Please, Your Honor, I'm sorry, I didn't mean what I said about you being a servant, I was just upset, I made a mistake, please don't do this to me. The desperation in her voice was undeniable. This was the same woman who'd marched into the courtroom treating everyone like they were beneath her designer shoes, now reduced to begging, like someone pleading for a last chance at mercy. Judge Judy watched with the cool detachment of someone observing a completely predictable reaction. "Oh, now you're sorry," she said. "Now you want to show remorse. Where was this attitude when you called me a servant? Where was this humility when you talked about Rosa as these people who need to learn their place?" Victoria reached her hands toward the bench, shaking violently. "I'll apologize to her, to everyone, please. I can't afford $15,000 right now. My family will disown me if they find out about this." The irony was lost on no one. The same woman who had spent the entire hearing bragging, directly and indirectly, about her family's influence and wealth was now claiming she couldn't afford the judgment. Judge Judy leaned in for one final surgical strike. "Ms. Ashford Wellington, you're about to learn a very expensive lesson. When you treat people like servants, when you abuse your power, when you weaponize the legal system against vulnerable people, eventually you run into someone who doesn't care about your last name or your bank balance. Today, that someone is me." She raised her gavel once more. "The judgment stands. Ms. Mendes is awarded $15,000 in punitive damages. You will also pay her legal fees in the amount of $8,000. Total judgment, $23,000. Additionally, you are ordered to have no further contact with Ms. Mendes or her family. Any violation will result in criminal harassment charges." The gavel crashed down like thunder. Victoria collapsed back into her chair, sobbing uncontrollably, her body shaking. Her breakdown was total. Rosa sat still, tears silently streaming down her face, but these tears were different. They were tears of vindication, of justice finally delivered after 5 long years of swallowing pain in silence. Judge Judy turned toward Rosa, and her voice softened slightly. "Ms. Mendes, you carried yourself with dignity and grace throughout this proceeding. I'm sorry for what you had to endure. Take this money, take care of your family, and remember, you never have to bow to bullies like her again." The courtroom erupted into spontaneous applause, audience, staff, even the camera crew. The bailiff escorted Victoria out, her sobs echoing down the halls like the ghost of her former arrogance. But the story didn't stop when the cameras cut. What followed proved that Judge Judy's ruling was just the beginning of Victoria's long overdue reckoning. Within 6 hours of the episode airing, the clip exploded online. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Reddit, you name it, the moment Victoria called Judge Judy a servant and the brutal 47 seconds that followed were everywhere. The hashtag #ServantKaren started trending worldwide, racking up over 200 million impressions in just the first 24 hours. News outlets covered it non-stop. Entitled "Heiress Gets Destroyed by Judge Judy After Calling Her a Servant" became the week's most clicked headline. Legal experts praised Judge Judy's handling of the case. Social justice advocates pointed to Victoria as a prime example of how unchecked privilege enables abuse. Late-night hosts played the clip to roaring laughter and applause. But the real damage to Victoria's life was just beginning. Within 48 hours, 3 of the 5 charity boards she sat on publicly requested her resignation. Their statements were carefully phrased but brutally clear. Her conduct did not reflect their values. Her country club of 15 years suspended her membership pending a review. Overnight, the doors of the elite social world she had always assumed would be open to her, no matter what, started slamming shut. Then came the IRS. The investigation Judge Judy had mentioned on air sped up rapidly once the episode circulated. Federal agents arrived at Victoria's estate with warrants and subpoenas. They uncovered that she'd failed to pay proper payroll taxes for household staff for over 6 years, resulting in roughly $340,000 in back taxes, penalties, and fines. Criminal charges for tax evasion and multiple labor violations followed. For the first time, prison wasn't just a theoretical possibility for Victoria, it was a very real threat. But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected source. 12 of her former household employees, inspired by Rosa's courage and Judge Judy's words, decided to step forward. They shared stories of ongoing abuse, wage theft, and illegal working conditions. Together, they filed a class action lawsuit seeking $2.3 million in back pay and damages for emotional distress. The woman who had terrorized employees for decades suddenly found herself staring down potential financial ruin and the real prospect of losing her freedom. Rosa Mendes, on the other hand, experienced a completely different kind of transformation, the kind that restored many viewers' faith in justice. The $23,000 judgment allowed her to finally pay for her daughter's much-needed dental surgery. Rosa then enrolled in a nursing assistant certification program, something she had dreamed about for years but could never afford. Local businesses, moved by her story, offered her flexible part-time work so she could study and still support her kids. 6 months after the episode, Rosa appeared on a follow-up segment. She had completed her CNA certification with honors and was now working at a local hospital, beloved by patients and respected by coworkers. Her children were thriving. She'd even saved enough for a down payment on a modest home of her own. When Judge Judy asked how she felt about Victoria now, Rosa's answer showed the same grace she'd shown in the courtroom. "I forgive her, Your Honor. I just hope she learns to treat people better. Everyone deserves respect no matter what job they do." Victoria's follow-up was far darker. Courtroom sketches from her tax hearings showed a woman almost unrecognizable from the one who'd strutted into Judge Judy's court. No designer outfits, no sparkling jewelry, no haughty posture. She looked exhausted, defeated, and for the first time genuinely remorseful. She eventually pleaded guilty to several tax charges. Her sentence, 2 years of probation, mandatory community service, and full restitution to her former employees. Her family, humiliated by the scandal, drastically cut her access to the trust fund, limiting her to a basic monthly allowance. She was forced to sell her Connecticut mansion and move into a modest apartment. But the most poetic form of justice came with her community service requirement. The judge, clearly familiar with her public case, ordered her to complete 500 hours at a women's shelter, cooking, cleaning, helping the very same kinds of people she'd spent her life looking down on. The lesson embedded in Victoria Ashford Wellington's spectacular downfall was crystal clear, and it resonated worldwide. Privilege without empathy is nothing more than cruelty backed by a bank account. Money can buy comfort, luxury, access. It can pay for lawyers, houses, and vacations, but what it cannot buy is immunity from consequences. It can't purchase genuine respect, and it can't erase a lifetime of treating other human beings as less than. That day, Judge Judy delivered much more than just a single verdict. She gave the world a powerful reminder of why respect matters, why accountability can't be optional, and why no amount of wealth can ultimately protect you from the consequences of your own cruelty. So smash that like button if you think Victoria got exactly what she deserved. Drop a comment telling me what kind of consequences you think entitled people should face when they abuse their power. And don't forget to hit subscribe, because next week we're bringing you the wild story of a Karen who actually called the police on Judge Judy, and you will not believe how that insane situation ended. Remember this, in Judge Judy's courtroom and in life, everyone serves something. The only real question is whether you serve justice, kindness, and respect, or whether you serve only your own ego. And as Victoria learned the hard way, that choice determines everything. Justice served, case closed.